All right. So let's start with Article 32 for additional dwelling unit. What, did I forget something already?
No. Did you get Burton Flynn?
Yes, she did.
Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Let's start with additional dwelling unit, Article 32.
Okay, that's me. So let me know. There we go. Great. 1 second. Okay, thank you. I'm representing the information on Article 32 that was previously provided at the Planning Board public hearing on February 25th. Next slide, please. Article 32 would replace a section of the zoning bylaw with new language that allows a building permit to be issued for one additional dwelling unit in a single-family dwelling or detached accessory structure subject to certain conditions. Concord zoning bylaw currently allows for the creation of one additional dwelling unit within an existing residence, subject to obtaining a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Passage of Article 32 would replace the existing provision in its entirety with new language that allows for creation of an additional dwelling unit upon issuance of a building permit. A special permit from the ZBA would no longer be required, subject, of course, to certain conditions. And let me take a moment to clarify what is meant by an additional dwelling unit. It's typically a small apartment or within or in close proximity to a principal residence. In common parlance, it's an in-law apartment. It's also often called an accessory dwelling unit in addition to being an additional dwelling unit. Next slide, please. The objective of Article 32 is to provide small additional rental dwelling units that will not substantially alter the appearance of the town and help enable owners of single-family dwellings larger than required, the dwellings that are larger than required for their present needs to share space and the burdens of home ownership. These are actually the same goals as stated in the existing additional dwelling unit provision of the zoning code, but Article 32 is intended to make it easier to create an accessory dwelling unit and to provide some greater flexibility in the form of the unit while applying reasonable limitations to help maintain Concord's existing character and appearance. Next slide, please. The current provisions of the zoning code allow accessory dwelling units by special permit and ZBA approval if the lot is at least 10,000 square feet. The unit is part of a single family dwelling, not detached. The single family dwelling is at least 2 years old. And in fact, the accessory dwelling unit cannot change the exterior of the single family dwelling as it's existed for the prior 2 years. The accessory dwelling unit is limited to 1/3 of the gross floor area of the residence in which it is located, and the special permit is not transferable on the sale of the property. Next slide, please. Under the existing bylaw, here's some information on the additional or accessory dwelling units that exist in Concord today. The Regional Housing Office did a survey, received 23 responses. There's more than 23 accessory dwellings in Concord, but got 23 responses. 64% of those are occupied by persons non-related to the homeowners. Only 50% have one, or over 50% have only one occupant, and 60% are one-bedroom units or studios, and over half have been in existence for greater than 10 years. So the takeaway, I think, is that it's 2/3 rented out, a third occupied by family. They tend to be small, and not a lot have been created over the last decade. Next slide, please. Here are the proposed changes that Article 32 would implement. It would allow units up to 750 square feet by right in all residential districts. And the note on you could get a special permit to go up to 1,000 square feet. And I'll talk about the special permit options in a moment. The unit could be attached or detached, such as in a garage, in a barn or outbuilding, or in a separate cottage. And to emphasize by right means that the owner does not have to go through the process of obtaining a special permit from the zoning board, which can be time-consuming and expensive process. They just have to obtain a building permit. Why 750 square feet or less? This helps define the unit as an accessory to the principal residence and helps maintain the appearance of town while meeting the objective identified as part of Concord's long-range plan of creating additional smaller affordable housing units. And instead of requiring that the additional unit be carved out of the footprint of an existing residence, the new unit could be in a separate structure. There are a lot of detached garages and barns in Concord, and this article could allow for some reuse of those structures as dwelling units. Given ZBA review would not be required for these applications, subject to the special permit options I'll discuss later, there are some additional express requirements that an applicant for the building permit would need to meet. Next slide, please. First, site requirements. The lot must meet the minimum size for the zoning district. Today, the zoning code just says it must be a minimum of 10,000 square feet, which is the smallest conforming lot in Concord. Other residential districts have larger requirements. So essentially it needs to be on a conforming lot, subject to getting a special permit. There's no more than one unit is allowed per lot. One parking space may be provided for the unit. This is a change from the existing bylaw. Currently, like any other residence, 2 parking spaces would be required at a minimum. And the property must be served by town sewer or be on an adequate septic system. That's the same from the existing bylaw. Next slide, please. Dimensional requirements are that the unit must occupy no more than 750 square feet, meet the required setbacks for a primary structure, so not an accessory structure, but for the primary structure, and meet primary and accessory structure height requirements. And the total gross floor area of all buildings on the lot must also conform to the maximum floor area ratio, So in the discussion of the special permit, I'll talk about the 2 asterisks on this page about exceeding 750 square feet or being in a setback for the primary structure. Next slide, please. The unit must be either occupied by the owner, or the owner must be in the single family dwelling that's on the same lot. The accessory dwelling unit may not be legally separated or sold apart from the single family dwelling, so no subdivision or creation of a condominium. I suppose unless the lot was large enough that it could be subdivided into 2 conforming lots. Then neither the single family dwelling nor the accessory dwelling unit may be used for bed and breakfast. And this was in response to some of the the growth of short occupancy rentals and other models like that. Next slide, please. In applying for a building permit, the applicant must provide a dimensioned floor plan of the additional dwelling unit, a site plan showing the location of the additional dwelling unit, as well as the parking configuration. And the unit may not be used until a final certificate of occupancy is issued by the building inspector. Next slide, please. Now, I've gone through everything that's allowed by right. If an applicant desired to go for a special permit, they could increase the unit size from 750 square feet up to a maximum of 1,000 square feet. And if the detached dwelling unit is in the side or rear setback, they could seek a special permit to allow for that. Or if the lot is non-conforming because it doesn't meet the size requirements for lots in that residential district. So on that second point, on it being in the side or rear setback, let's say, for example, there's an existing barn building that's near the property line as is allowed for an accessory structure, but not a dwelling unit. They could turn that into a dwelling unit by obtaining a special permit and going through the Zoning Board of Appeals. Next slide, please. This article is proposed by the Planning Board in response to Housing Goal number 5 from the current long-range plan, which, to quote, says we should encourage renovation of existing single-family homes in all zoning districts and identify the opportunities to create accessory dwelling units within existing structures, emphasis on structures, in all zoning districts. And the plan the plan includes an action item to amend the 2-family or additional dwelling unit bylaw to meet this goal, which is why we're presenting this now. Next slide, please. We took a look at some neighboring towns for similar bylaws. Some have allowed the process to proceed by right with just a building permit. Some require a special permit, as Concord currently does. Some allow it by right in detached structures. Some require a special permit. there's not a lot of numbers here to draw conclusions from, but generally speaking, the hope is that by allowing it by right and allowing it in detached structures, it would help us meet that housing goal number 5 as expressed in the long-range plan. With that, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Burton. So we will open it up to public comment, to questions, and thank you to everyone who's attending. We hope to see you all at town meeting as well. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like to make, please raise your hand and we can unmute you. And we know some of the articles will have more discussion than others, so I won't belabor it if there aren't any hands up. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds just in case people are finding the button. I see a couple hands, so let me give folks a chance to put their hands up, and then the administrator is going to unmute you, and then please state your name and address, and we'd love to hear from you. I think we're ready for perhaps Ms. Dritt.
Hi, Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. And I was wondering if it would be, if you had a smaller building and you tore down the house and you built a duplex or a 2-family, would that be allowed? Or would that be an entirely different thing?
Well, there's another provision of this subsection of the zoning code that refers specifically to 2 families. A 2-family structure could be, I believe, could have separate ownership and the like. But the building does not need to be pre-existing to create. The principal building does not need to be pre-existing to create a accessory dwelling unit. So conceivably, yes, you could tear down an existing structure if allowed and build a new principal residence and accessory dwelling unit if the building of that principal structure was otherwise allowed by right under the zoning code, subject to getting a building permit. Otherwise, you need a special permit or potentially other forms of zoning relief.
Thank you.
But if I understand, correctly, when we were proposing the 2-family also, that was distinct from this in the fact that if it was considered 2-family, they could be sold individually as condos. Whereas that's different for what we're proposing for the accessory dwelling unit, correct?
Yeah, that wasn't my article, but I believe that is one of the distinctions between the zoning code's use of 2-family versus an additional dwelling unit.
Yeah, and the other is that, of course, the maximum size of an accessory dwelling, even with special permits, 1,000 square feet gross floor area. So, if you could conceivably create 2 side-by-side units if they were both under 1,000 square feet, but that would be unusual in Concord.
And there's no way
of making under common ownership. They wouldn't be able to be separately owned.
There's no way of making one larger than 1,000.
Oh yes, absolutely. But so you could have a large house, then with an accessory dwelling of 750 square feet by right, brand new, that you would construct at the same time.
Well, I mean, the accessory dwelling is limited to 1,000 square feet with a special permit, and that won't fit a family. That will fit at most a couple or a single person, because you need at least 2 bedrooms for a family.
That's right. So that's kind of the intent of the. I'm sorry to speak out of turn.
Yeah. That's really the focus here of expanding this accessory dwelling unit is to address the need for housing for empty nesters and the like who may not have a larger family and are finding that they're living in a large home that's expensive to maintain and pay taxes on, that they want to be able to downsize without having to move out of Concord or sell their principal residence. So that's pretty much the target.
Okay.
We did have a separate 2-family article that we postponed just because we felt that it would need further discussion. So hopefully we'll take that up again next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to unmute the next folks. So Mark and Tanya Galis, you should be able to speak.
I believe they've
Oh.
unmuted Mariah Walsh, but now Mark. I know.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm Vera Walsh, 169 Thoreau Street.
Okay.
And I just wanted to thank you for the thoughtful article. It's so well designed. And I think you've taken in all the things that could possibly be a problem. And Burton, you did a great presentation. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moira.
Thank you. Now let's try Mark and Tanya Galis. Apologies.
Hello. Yes, just a simple clarification question. So if our current septic system would not be adequate, and we wanted to take advantage of this option, we would just have to replace the septic system with an adequate one and then proceed without any extra permitting. Is that correct?
Assuming you met the remainder of the requirements that are specified, that's correct. The having an adequate septic system to account for the increased flow and the number of bedrooms in the accessory dwelling unit are one requirement. Certainly, if you're not meeting that requirement, that would be a thing you'd need to solve before you could meet all the other requirements.
But it would be adequate for that requirement to just replace the septic system, and then of course, the other requirements would need to be met too. I understand.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think there's one more. There was one more hand. Is there still one more hand?
They put their hand down.
Maybe the question was answered. All right. Well, thank you for the questions.